Hey, David Brewster here with another 3 for All, and this is 3 Carlos Santana licks from 1989. And definitely Carlos Santana is yet another, guitar legend, a legend of Latin rock, and hit the scene in the 60s and definitely kind of gave rock music a big, facelift. And I think for a lot of rock music fans at that time, they weren't used to hearing Latin percussion and congas and all these, really rhythmic sounds in Santana's rock music, and that was revolutionary. And definitely Santana, I mean, has recorded and worked with everybody. So here's an image with just some of the people that Carlos Santana has either worked or recorded or performed with. And the full list is endless. It's like, oh my gosh, this guy has worked with everybody. I know for me personally, Santana was kind of the link to help me understand modes. And I was working with modes and scales, and I didn't really understand. I mean, I had a head full of information, but I didn't really have it fleshed out on the guitar. And I remember I sat down and I started working with some Santana music because everybody was telling me, oh, you want to learn Dorian, then you need to learn some Santana. And I didn't understand why. And I thought, why is everybody telling me to learn Santana if I'm approaching Dorian? So I jumped in, Black Magic Woman, Oyo Como Va, and some of those songs, and it was like a light bulb went off over my head, where I thought, oh my gosh, I think I understand these modes, or at least I understand what Santana was kind of doing with them. And that kind of helped me open that door. And then next thing I knew, I was tapping into Lydian and studying a lot of Frank Zappa and Steve Vai and Satriani and people, got into Phrygian and Mixolydian and really understood, modes and scales a lot better. So we're going to tap into, discussing, Dorian, Aeolian, and kind of, some of these modal, trademarks in Santana's music. I have talked to a lot of students and a lot of peers and friends over the years. I've even noticed a lot of comments popping up online. And for some reason, Carlos Santana is kind of on everybody's negative list. There's all this dirt kind of thrown at him. And regardless of how you feel about him working with pop artists, in recent years, which kind of started with the Supernatural album, when he collaborated with Rob Thomas and the song Smooth came out, which was huge. That was like the first, that was like the biggest hit of Santana's career. But that was the first time he charted or really had done anything in a couple decades, you have to remember. So his career had a big boost from that moment. But Santana played at, Woodstock, and his set at Woodstock was phenomenal. And everybody talks about Hendrix or they talk about, other performances, but Mountain and Santana at Woodstock was killer. I think Leslie West had the best tone, and I think Santana had the best set. It was just electric and they were on fire. The licks from this lesson actually come from a concert that Santana performed back in 1989 at Watsonville High School. And when I found this footage, I was confused and I thought, wow, was, Santana playing high schools in 1989? I didn't understand the high school, situation. So then I looked it up and I was trying to figure out, why was he playing at this high school? But apparently there was a really bad earthquake, and Watsonville was kind of the center of the damage from the earthquake. And Carlos Santana and Los Lobos and some other performers did a benefit concert at Watsonville High School to raise money to help the people affected by the earthquake. And when I read that, I thought, that's just one story, but that's literally Carlos Santana. I mean, he's kind of a spiritual musician, he's a giver, he loves people, he has a very peaceful, mindset and approach to life and his music. And that's one small example of the heart that lives in Carlos Santana. He performed this concert to help people, and I think that's awesome. And now we're going to target these licks, and hopefully it's going to help you, tap into some different ideas and sounds from Carlos Santana. The first lick from this footage is this very uplifting kind of melodic moment that he starts at the beginning of this jam. And the footage that I found, like the first half, Santana is just playing this kind of majestic, guitar solo by himself. I think there's like keyboard and maybe some bass kind of filling in behind him with chords. And then it turns into a blues jam, but this is during the kind of dreamy, melodic part. And the lick, it's something like this. Something like that. And it's basically based around A minor, and we're not really targeting the sixth. So it's, you know, basically, I guess you could think of that as Aeolian, even though we're not really hitting the sixth in there anywhere. Because Santana is typically known for hitting Dorian a lot in his music, and we're going to hit that in this lesson, talk about it. But with this, he's kind of cleverly avoiding the sixth. So he's doing this in the beginning, and there he's grabbing that A, B, A, and back to that G right there. And then he starts doing that as a hammer-on pull-off. Kind of does that like 6 times, not counting the first hammer-on pull-off. And he just kind of ends with that little melodic phrase. But it has this very, you know, just uplifting sound, very spiritual and melodic too. And I like phrases like that where it's simple, but it grabs you, it grabs your attention. You know, listen to this type of thing. Before we go any further, we're going to talk about the difference between Aeolian and Dorian, because I have had some questions about this from viewers and from students over the years too. This is confusing. So there's really just one note different between Aeolian and Dorian. And the phrase that we just played avoided the note that's different between those two scales. You know, I mentioned how we weren't playing the sixth, you know, in this lick. You know, it just completely avoids that note in that phrase. But during this dreamy kind of intro part, Santana's basically using Aeolian. He's not playing Dorian. He does, you know, eventually kind of target the sixth and plays, you know, a minor 6 or a flat 6. So in the key of A minor right here, and if you just think of a 1 octave A minor pentatonic right here, you know, there's A, C, D, E, G. Those are the 5 notes for minor pentatonic in the key of A. So if we think of A natural minor, that's all the white keys on the piano starting on the note A. That's just A, B, C, D, E, F, G, like this. And there's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. Now if we convert this to Dorian, we're going to raise the 6th, or we're going to take that flat 6, which is F, and modify that to F sharp. So we're going to play a normal 6th, our major 6th. Right? That's Dorian. That's your Dorian money note right there. Just remember there's one note different. You know, Aeolian has F natural and Dorian has F sharp. Right, just one note different. And it's really the chord progression behind you that's going to really define and kind of dictate what you can do there. So over Aeolian, you're going to basically, you can move from a minor 1 chord to a minor 4 chord. So that's A minor to D minor. A minor, D minor. Now if you look at D minor right there, there's F natural in the chord right there. Right? That 4 chord is definitely, you know, kind of signaling F natural. Now if we modify the 4 chord and we change it to a major chord, like say D7, now we're tapping into Dorian, because now we have A minor, or A minor 7 to D7. And that's going to definitely signal Dorian, because now there's that F sharp. And think of Oye Como Va, you know, from Santana. So right there, it's, you know, A minor 7 to a D9. So a minor 1 chord to a major 4 chord, and that signals Dorian big time. So once again, A minor pentatonic, A natural minor, and A Dorian. And to really drive this home, here's a clip of Santana playing Oye Como Va back in 1970. The next lick is interesting because it starts as an Aeolian run and finishes with harmonic minor, and we've talked about harmonic minor a lot on this channel, but it's something like this. And right there you can see we're starting with this Aeolian, you know, scale. It just stops there on that E note. And he just kind of comes down that scale, you know, kind of gradually and melodically. And right at the very end, he basically targets that G sharp right there. So we're kind of moving from A minor to E7 or E major, you know, and that's signaling harmonic minor. So, you know, a minute ago we looked at Dorian. We were talking about how, you know, Dorian kind of thrives around a minor 1 to a major 4. Well, harmonic minor revolves around a minor 1 to a major 5. So it's a little twist, you know, that progression. But that's basically what's happening with that lick. And he's kind of, you know, signaling that E major or E7 tonality, which signals harmonic minor. Here's another lick from this footage where he's blurring between Aeolian and harmonic minor, something like this. And once again, he's kind of targeting that little piece of E major. So it starts with this hammer-on pull-off phrase over A minor. And once again, he's kind of ending with that little piece of E major, you know, as an arpeggio. It's just those little subtle phrases, you know, where it's pinpointing or targeting a different mode or tonality. And Santana's a master at that, where he'll play a phrase and then maybe, you know, target one note or a couple notes, and that signals a change coming up in the chord progression or a change coming somewhere in the song. And that's a really cool and expressive way of dictating, you know, something changing in your music. Kind of play around with that phrase and come up with other variations. You know, that was kind of a loose variation of what he's playing in that lick. But you can find a ton of variations of that phrase. Here's a bonus lick from this footage, and I added this just because I thought it was kind of funny. So the kind of spiritual, you know, melodic intro of this, you know, performance, you know, once that kind of transpires, it turns into a blues jam, and it's basically Santana playing with Los Lobos, you know, on stage. And Santana played this whole guitar solo in the beginning, you know, loosely by himself, and then the band kind of kicks in with this blues jam, and then the members of Los Lobos take solos first. And the solos sound great, but they just fill it up with all this volume and all these bending licks, and they're playing a whole bunch, and you can tell they're all really into it. I mean, they're sharing the stage with Santana, so you can tell they're pumped up, and they take a couple cycles of guitar solos, and then suddenly it's back to Santana. And this is basically what Santana played when he starts his solo in the blues jam. And when it got to him, I just started laughing because I realized, like, wow, he's kind of making a statement here. Like, you guys just completely overplayed, so I'm going to play real simple. And this is what he played at the start of his solo. I don't know why it just made me laugh. I just thought, okay, he just showed you guys, he just took you all to school, with 3 notes. And I've done this before, like in jam situations or blues jams where somebody starts overplaying, and then when it comes back around to your solo, you just do something really simple to kind of send a message like, hey dude, calm down. It's a blues jam, or we're just kind of playing, don't turn into impellitteri, during a blues jam. But here we're doing, and there he's literally targeting that 6th again. Now we're in E or E7, but he's targeting that B to C sharp to E. That real biting Santana tone. And then he pauses, giant pause, silence, and then does it again. And then he basically just answers that, with another little phrase. So it's interesting to, approach blues jams and, solos like that. You don't have to fill it up with every lick and trick that you know. Sometimes it's good to kind of hold back and just play little bits of, licks and phrases and melodies. And just finding those little kind of expressive phrases is really cool. All right, that's going to wrap this look at 3 Carlos Santana licks from 1989. And definitely Santana is a spiritual, very, very important musician. I think he's kind of misunderstood in today's world. I think definitely back in the 60s, people just locked onto him and they looked at him, as like a musical prophet. And definitely his reign in the 60s and 70s, very impressive. Lots of great music, lots of musicians, that he worked with and collaborated with. And then somewhere around the 80s, he was still active and still busy, but eventually, like he lost his record, contract and stuff like that. And he was just kind of floating, for years with, just touring and whatever, kind of came along. And it wasn't until, Supernatural, like in the 90s or whatever, when that hit, that kind of gave his career like a big boost that it desperately needed, because he was kind of running out of gas, before that in a way. And people remembered him, but he wasn't really that active on the scene. He definitely didn't have things on the charts, and then the next thing you knew, Santana was back, and he had a huge comeback. And I remember, I definitely was happy for him. I thought, great, he didn't just disappear into obscurity. He had a massive, surge in popularity and introduced his music to, generations and younger people and stuff. And that's always a good thing. So definitely a fan. I respect Carlos Santana. I think he's very important to have on planet Earth, kind of nurturing music and inspiring people for sure. So leave some feedback and some comments. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.